But no democracy movement operates in ideal circumstances. Activist leaders must confront and resolve dilemmas that we onlookers are free to ignore. People living under dictatorship often have to choose between the difficult and the impossible. Yet many from us, from a safe distance, expect Venezuela's democratic leadership to pursue their aims with a moral purity their opponents never display. This is unrealistic, this is unfair, and it shows ignorance of history. Many who have stood at this podium to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, including Lech Walesa and Nelson Mandela, knew well the dilemmas of dialogue. In authoritarian systems, dialogue can lead to improvement, but it can also be a trap. Dialogue is often used to buy time, create division, and control the agenda. Maria Corina Machado has participated in dialogue processes for years. She's never rejected the principle of talking to the other side, but she's dismissed empty processes. Peace without justice is not peace. Dialogue without truth is not reconciliation. Venezuela's future can take many forms, but the present is one thing only. It is horrific. That is why
that is the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony that is currently happening. Remember, this year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. She is not present at this ceremony because, remember, she's living in hiding. Her daughter, Anna, will be receiving this award on her behalf. We'll keep getting you more updates on this. At the moment, we're slipping into a short break.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building, coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building, coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
From within and spreads instability abroad. Democracy is obviously no guarantee of peace, but it is the most effective system we have to prevent violence and conflict. This line of reasoning often prompts a well-known counter-argument that democracy itself causes unrest and conflict, that demanding freedom is dangerous. This is an old claim. Authoritarian leaders have used it for generations to defend their positions of power. Today, they supercharge the argument with disinformation and propaganda, two of their essential weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, as citizens of a democracy, we have a duty to be critical of information sources. Alarm bells should ring when the views we express are identical to those disseminated by one of the world's most manipulative disinformation systems. For in that case, we are not just spreading information, we are spreading the strategic propaganda of a dictator. What are we all to think when we read that is the Venezuelan opposition that is threatening the country with war, that the democratic movement desire an invasion, when the narrative is turned upside down and when the victims are branded as aggressors? This is a version of reality that the Maduro regime tells the world, that it is the guarantor of peace. But peace based on fear, silence, and torture is no peace. It is submission depicted as stability. No, the source of the violence is not the democracy activists. It is those at the top who refuse to cede power. It was not Nelson Mandela who made South Africa violent, but the apartheid regime's crackdown on demands for equality. Opposition groups did not start the imprisonments in Belarus, the executions in Iran, or the persecution in Venezuela. The violence comes from authoritarian regimes as they lash out against popular calls for change. Peace and democracy cannot be separated without draining both of meaning. Lasting peace depends on the rule of law, political participation, and respect for human dignity. Before we can discuss political disagreements, we must establish some form of democracy. Without it, there is no meaningful distinction between right and left, no way to legitimately disagree, no genuine politics. Democracy is not an expendable luxury. It is not an ornament to be put on a shelf. Democracy is hard work. It is action and negotiation. It is a living obligation. The instruments of democracy are the instruments of peace. We gather here today, therefore, to defend something far more important than either side of a political or ideological divide. We gather to defend democracy itself, the very foundation on which lasting peace rests. When people refuse to surrender democracy, they refuse to surrender peace. One who understands this is Maria Corina Machado. As a founder of Sumate, an organization devoted to building democracy, Ms. Machado stepped forward to advocate free and fair elections more than 2 decades ago. As she herself put it, it was a choice of ballots over bullets. In political office and in her service to organizations, Ms. Machado has spoken out for judicial independence, human rights, and popular representation. She has spent years working for the freedom of the Venezuelan people. The presidential election of 2024 was a key factor in the selection of this year's Peace Prize. Ms. Machado was the opposition presidential candidate and the country's unifying voice of hope. When the regime blocked her candidacy, the movement might have collapsed, but through her support behind Edmundo González Urrutia and the opposition stayed together. The opposition found common ground in the demand for free elections and representative government. This is the very foundation of democracy, our shared willingness to defend the principle of popular rule, even if you disagree on policy. At a time when democracy is under threat around the world, it is more important than ever to defend this common ground. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers mobilized across political divides. They were trained as election observers and used technology in new ways to document each step of the election. Up to 1 million people stood watch over polling stations around the country. They uploaded vote tallies, photographed records, and secured copies before the regime could destroy them. They defended this documentation with their lives, then made sure the world learned the result of the election. This was grassroots mobilization, unlike any that Venezuelan and probably the world had ever seen. Ordinary citizens from all walks of life carrying out systematic, high-tech documentary work in an atmosphere of threats, surveillance, and violence. The efforts of this democracy movement, both before and after the election, were innovative and brave, peaceful and democratic. The opposition received international support when its leaders publicized the vote counts that were collected from the country's election districts, showing that the opposition had won by a clear margin. But the regime denied it all. It falsified the election result and clung to power violently. For the past year, Ms. Machado has had to live in hiding. Despite serious threats, she has remained in the country, an inspiration to millions. She is receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025 for her tireless work promoting democratic rights of the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a peaceful and just transition from dictatorship to democracy. For a long, long time, the opposition in Venezuela has relied on democracy's toolbox to wage its peaceful civilian campaign. Over the years, Ms. Machado and her allies have had to adapt and change tactics. They've applied almost every democratic tool, from election boycotts when the system was too rotten, to participation when small openings in the process made it possible. They've tried dialogue, organization, mobilization, and extensive election documentation. Ms. Machado has appealed for international attention, support, and pressure, not for an invasion of Venezuela. She has urged people to stand up for their rights using peaceful, democratic means. Peace research shows it clearly. Widespread, non-violent mobilization is among the most effective methods of achieving political change in a dictatorship. When a population mobilizes and the international community exerts strong pressure and the security forces refrain from using violence against the population, a tipping point may arrive.
All right, so that, of course, is the ceremony that was unfolding at Oslo for the Nobel Peace Prize that's been awarded to Ms. Machado. Now, over 2 years of war and 2 months of imposed ceasefire on the Gaza Strip, the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is at a critical juncture. And around this time, the Israeli troops took the reporters on the ground to show what they described as the Hamas's tunnel network. Take a look at this report.
One after another, the Israeli soldiers squeeze through narrow passage and enter an embedded network of tunnels in southern Gaza. Inside the dark and twisted route, some bowed their heads to avoid hitting the ceiling, while watching their step as they walked over or around jagged concrete, crushed plastic bottles and tattered mattresses. On Monday, the Israeli Defense Forces took reporters on the ground to the southernmost tip of Gaza, Rafah, the city which was home to a large number of Palestinians that IDF troops seized last year.
And right behind you is basically a secret part of the tunnel that was uncovered by us. It was concealed first by the basically cement walls that you see all over. And while we worked here for a year and a half, we found a lot of these. And uncovered more and more of the tunnel, eventually uncovering more than 7 kilometers of tunnel network and more than 80 rooms.
Israel banned international journalists from entering Gaza since the war began over 2 years ago, except for rare, brief visits supervised by military such as this one.
We are in a tunnel in Rafah. You can see how narrow it is, but Israel says that this is one of the main tunnels in Rafah, that it is a complex tunnel, stretches for about 10 kilometers and has dozens of rooms. Israel said that top commanders were here during the war, including Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar, one of the architects behind the October 7th attack. Now the body of Hadar Goldin was found here. He was a soldier. His body was kept by Hamas in Gaza for more than 10 years and was recently returned.
The army hasn't decided what to do with the tunnel. It could seal it with concrete, explode it, hold it for intelligence purposes, among other options. Driving around Rafah, one can see towers of mangled concrete, wires and twisted metal lining the roads. Few buildings still standing, but none unscathed. Remnants of people's lives remain scattered the ground. Last week, Israel announced its decision to reopen the Rafah crossing, but only for people to leave the strip. For Palestinians, the fear of not returning to their ancestral land still remains even after 2 months of ceasefire.
The ceasefire is at a critical moment right now, with phase 1 nearly to be done, and phase 2, which has a lot of these thornier issues that still aren't sorted out. Israel wants Hamas to disarm and for Gaza to be completely demilitarized. Hamas wants Israel to withdraw from the area that it controls. There needs to be an international stabilization force. It's unclear who is going to take part in that. So there's still a lot of questions as phase 1 is nearing its end and phase 2 is expected to begin.
Hamas says there will be no movement to the next phase of truce unless Israel ends its continued violations. On its part, Israel remains adamant to completely demilitarize and eliminate Hamas from Gaza. Bureau